Give me just a second here. Get this thing started up. You know, I really was happy to hear a few nullificationists in the crowd after that last speaker. You know, just because the Supreme Court says that something's a law and that we have to follow it doesn't mean it's any good. I mean, what about the Fugitive Slave Act? You know, the Fugitive Slave Act was actually nullified in Syracuse in 1851. That's my hometown. And the governor of New York disobeyed that law and he was arrested. But it didn't matter, you know, it helped to turn popular opinion. So nullification is an excellent tool. It's what Thomas Jefferson called the rightful remedy to tyranny. So I'm really happy to hear that a lot of people here are nullificationists. That's just excellent. You know, that is excellent because, you know, sometimes when we have our little groups and our little group meetings, some of the new people, we don't tell them a lot of our overarching philosophy. We talk about the issue of the day. So sometimes I feel like we might be neglecting our flock a little bit because some of the newer people don't know about these things. We got really nullification, definitely, I mean, with the SAFE Act, you know, that's not going to get repealed. All these people who are putting all their time and effort into getting the SAFE Act repealed, I think it's kind of silly. We really need to keep going with the counties that have rejected it and get them to nullify. You know, I had a county legislator come up to me, and he's a lawyer, and he said, you know, David, I don't agree with you on nullification. I don't generally agree. But if there was ever a bill that I would consider nullifying from this county, it would be that one. You know, so we've got them. We've got them. You know, and we need to keep going with that. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you today. I'm definitely thrilled to see some of my fellow Ron Paul supporters in the room. I just saw him. I just had a meeting with Ron Paul this week, and I'm proud to say he's endorsed one of my campaigns for the second time. I'm really happy. You know,
remember that he used to be a libertarian.
Yeah, I remember. Well, if you go on Facebook and look into affiliations of his whole family, it all says Libertarian Party and almost everybody, all the Piats. Anyway, you know, a lot of you've been in this fight since at least 2007. Some since Murray Rothbard was around, which is absolutely incredible. You guys are amazing. You know, I am a registered Republican, but I most often find myself identified by the Libertarian Party's constitutional platform. Unfortunately, in New York State, as Chris Eads has mentioned, we have election laws that can make it very difficult to break free of the two-party system. So a lot of principled philosophical libertarians might even find themselves affiliated with Republicans and Democrats for electoral purposes. Heck, I happen to know that some of you voted for Ron Paul in the last primary, so you would have had to have been a Republican for that. Nevertheless, I don't see any way as the wrong way, as long as the liberty message is faithfully preached. In fact, I rather like the idea of our liberty message permeating society through several different vessels at a time. I think it's excellent. You know, through the Libertarian Party as one example. So don't let me offend you with my party affiliation. Just know that the liberty message is being faithfully preached in many places. Sometimes we run into anarcho-capitalists, anarchists, libertarians, Republicans, and even a few conservatives maybe, who claim that theirs is the only true way to promote the message. But really, if the liberty movement were a monolith, we would have to question its authentic identity as being truly libertarian. You know, we need to appreciate and really embrace the marketplace of ideas that we have instead of fighting against one another when it comes to methods sometimes. A bit of what I'm going to say today, I spoke of last year at Liberty Fest NYC. And when I posted video about it on YouTube and Facebook, there were some comments posted indicating that this was the best explanation of why a conservative should consider becoming a libertarian instead. In fact, it actually convinced some local social conservatives in my area that involving the state is not the solution to problems of morality. Probably everyone here has heard the statist argument that we need the government to keep people from harming each other. That people need to be forced to do the right thing and act decently toward one another. That libertarians are a bunch of hedonists who just want to indulge their immorality. Or that we're selfish and uncaring about our fellow man. Or the best one of all, that people, for example, in this room, only supported people such as Ron Paul and Gary Johnson because we want to shoot up heroin and have sex with prostitutes. I knew somebody would say, what's wrong with that? You guys are hilarious. Well, we all know that for the most part, these are just lies created to grow the power of the state and the people's trust in its glorious goodness. We know that the state is the greatest collection of the immoral, the murderers, the thieves, and rapists. And they only get away with it by pretending to protect us all from those same evils. But what about us? What sort of movement are we? What sort of individuals are we? What principles motivate and guide us? We're blessed to have a truly philosophical movement, grounded in a genuine, uncompromising dedication to the principle of pure liberty. We don't just have politicians and pundits, thank goodness, because that would be very depressing. No, we also have economists, historians, and philosophers who've helped us to develop our understanding of the goal we strive for. So unlike others, our statist friends, we can see where we came from without state-colored glasses. And we have a picture of what is possible in a future without the guns of government dictating humanity's every move. So I'd like to get a little more philosophical today and discuss the basic concepts of liberty and virtue. True liberty is the lifeblood of the fullness of human achievement. It is like the soil that nourishes and upholds the tree. It's like the air we breathe, so vitally important to our being. But it's what we do with that liberty that makes all the difference in the world. These days, a lot of people believe that you need the government to tell you what to do. You need laws and the constant watchful eye of the police state surveillance in order to behave rightly. They just put up cameras in my neighborhood. Oh, man. Anyway, anyone here can tell you that that's nonsense. That's madness. In order to do what's right, we need liberty. At the same time, in order to have liberty, we must have virtue. And I know you might be sitting in your chair thinking, is this jerk trying to tell me what to do? What do I mean by virtue? I mean doing the right thing as a matter of character. Noble character traits like generosity, patience, courage, temperance, these are classic virtues. Opposing these are vices, which a virtuous person seeks to eliminate from his character. Laziness, dishonesty, cowardice, envy. Tell me which of these lists, the virtues or the vices, best describes our statist friends. When you grow up under a powerful government, it's easy to cultivate your vices. You envy those wealthier than you. You sit back and let the government take care of you and others. You sign up for an Obama phone. You engage in all sorts of behaviors that keep you fat and happy and unquestioning. But it's hard to develop your virtues in this type of environment. In fact, you might say it's impossible. Can you be generous to your neighbor by stealing from another neighbor? Of course not. So you can't be charitable through taxes. Can you be responsible with your money and save it and invest it wisely when it's being eaten away by constant inflation caused by the Federal Reserve Bank? Suppose you could try. Can you raise and educate your kids when they're carted off to state brainwashing prisons 5 days a week or more? Fundamentally, when every important decision is made for you and every action you take is taken out of a base sense of duty, patriotism, or just following orders, it is impossible to be a morally responsible and virtuous individual. In a country where legal is right and illegal is wrong, it is impossible to be virtuous. In order to be virtuous, we must be free to make our own judgments and choices and be responsible for the consequences. In order to be virtuous, we must have liberty. The opposite of liberty is bondage, subjugation. Our virtues need the waters of liberty in order to flourish. Statism is the rot that sucks away our liberty and withers our virtues. This is the fundamental evil of statism. It converts reasoning, morally responsible individuals into unthinking, amoral, irresponsible cogs in a machine. And there are plenty of cogs out there who are perfectly content with that. But as folks who promote liberty, this is precisely what we need to avoid at all costs. Vices are easy, and they're right at home in the government. The lazy, the unimaginative, the greedy, the fraudulent, the bloodthirsty. They all find a home and a base of operations in the state. That's exactly what welfare laws are all about, as well as copyright laws, drug laws, currency laws, taxes, and wars, and much, much more. It's all about satisfying the vices of the people calling the shots and those willing to serve them. The state is not just an impediment to virtue, the state is the center of vice. Statism is inherently violent and inherently vicious. There is no way to reform the vice out of a system based on involuntary compliance, for the simple reason that slavery is immoral. So we oppose the state, and we promote liberty. I mean, we need to be promoters of liberty. We need to sell it. Especially people in this room and others that we know in our groups. We're the leaders of this movement. We really need to live it. We need to show what it really means. We oppose the state because it is vicious and violent and immoral. Well, guess what? That means that to oppose the state, we must be virtuous and nonviolent and moral. You can't win against a bad guy without being the good guy, because if you're not the good guy, you're a bad guy. Should make sense. As I mentioned earlier, in order to have virtue, we have to have liberty. Now I'll go one step further and say that this is precisely the purpose of liberty. We're not free individuals so that we can wreck our bodies and our relationships, neglect others, lie and cheat, and get wasted and die. What would be the point of that? Yeah, you're free to do those things if you call that freedom. And you should be free to suffer the consequences, but that's a very dismal view of what we can do with liberty. No, the reason we are free is so that we can reach our full positive potential as human beings. To be truly human is to make conscious decisions, undertake conscious action, and to bear responsibility. To be free and fulfilled human beings means to cultivate relationships, discipline the mind and body, invent opportunity, deal nobly with others, and leave an honorable legacy to our children. In short, to get rid of vices and develop virtues. Sure, you're free to waste away if that's what you want to do, free to fail, free to sin, free to be miserable, and free to suffer. But if you want to know what liberty is really all about, look at the virtues. Think of them in positive terms. Unfortunately, I've just lost my speech because the battery's dead, but what are you going to do? In order to be, in order to live to the full potential, like our founding fathers, look to people like Tom Woods and Ron Paul. These aren't people that just live their lives in want and abandon and just, go around being maniacs. There's a lot of people who are new to our movement who think that that's what it's all about. But, as leaders of our movement, we should really look to the opportunity, to attract others. We're not going to do that just by, abusing ourselves and others. So, idea, basically, live virtuous lives, because that's how we maintain liberty in this country, and that's how we can move it forward. Thank you.
To embellish a little bit on David's point, Ron Paul is a guy who I voted for Ron Paul. I voted for Ron Paul in 1988 as the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States of America. And I think many of us in this room who, I know you weren't alive yet, but those of us who...
I was 7.
You were 7, okay. But Jim Harris and I were of voting age, and I know that we each had that privilege of voting. And the message is what matters. It's not the messenger. And Dr. Paul is probably the best messenger of liberty during my lifetime in this country. But it's the message. It's the message that matters, and the fact that some people do it within other parties, because our party is still small and growing, and one day, we will be the party, but it's that message that matters. And David, I think, has done a very good job of encapsulating that message. So now let's fire some questions at him. We have about 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, would you consider running as a governor candidate for the Libertarian Party next year?
Right now, I'm in the middle of an endorsement battle with the Republican Party for my city council race. It's a little bit premature. I'm running for city council right now. For me to talk about running for governor. It sounds great. One of the guys that I've got my eye on right now is Assemblyman David DiPietro, who has had a 100% rating from all the various liberty groups in New York State. I like the guy. I would look at him, but if he's not considering the LP, maybe look elsewhere.
We're in New York. Why don't you also try to run on the Libertarian line in this local issue? This local office. You can do Republican and Libertarian in New York.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Gigi,
It's a good
great
idea.
idea.
Good idea.
I like it. Sorry.
Go get 500 signatures. That's all you need.
Besides political expediency, is there a spot where you do split with, our platform or our beliefs?
besides political expediency, meaning like party loyalty.
Obviously,
in
no,
that
but I mean,
party.
like, obviously, it's easier to get on a ballot on a Republican.
Yeah,
line.
it's easier to get on the ballot as a Republican, easier in the Independence line, in the Conservative Party line, those things, especially where I live, that's usually the trifecta for a Republican candidate. And that would be pretty much it. I mean, the platform of individual liberty, constitutional liberty, I think that should be the platform of the party I'm in right now. Unfortunately, I don't think our state party has a platform. But a friend of mine, he's the city chair of the Syracuse Republican Party, and he's another Paul supporter like me. And he said, I went up to Ed Cox, the chairman of the New York State GOP, and said, do we have a platform? And he said, our candidates are the platform. So that's worrisome. That's worrisome. You know, if we stay that route, what we're doing with the GOP, you know, we want to actually force a platform on the party. Otherwise, I mean, obviously, I'm with the Libertarian platform.
What liberty issues for a city councilman come to the fore?
Well, I have been an outspoken critic of the SAFE Act. For one, you know, even police say that violent crime rises when you ban assault weapons. That's one thing. I'm a nullificationist in general for things that I find to be unconstitutional. Just because the Supreme Court says they're right doesn't make them right. Like I said before, look at the Fugitive Slave Act. You know, there are other issues that come up. Guns do come up in city council. Right now in my city, there was an initiative to make it illegal to ask a prospective employee if they had a felony record. So I look at that as a violation of free speech. I look at that as a violation of free enterprise, of entering into a contract. You know, I look at that as a big problem. That is a city issue right now where I am. Another issue came up where they said that it should be that we need to charge people a whole bunch of extra money if they have an alarm system on their house. Those are other things that come up, you know, that violate your right to protect yourself. So
I wasn't clear on that. You're saying it's a violation to ask someone?
No. My city had proposed, and fortunately it failed because it's just an absurd notion. But they had proposed that you, as an employer, should not be allowed to ask if someone has a criminal background until you've already offered them a job.
Remember you mentioning something about copyright law. Isn't copyright law a fundamentally a libertarianly good thing? I mean, it protects the intellectual property of somebody who came up with whatever it was.
No, I disagree.
But tell me why.
Well, copyright law. Well, copying, you're not stealing anything from anybody. You're just making one more. I don't see copying as theft.
Isn't it intellectual property?
No, I don't think that you can own something that you think.
I created this idea, and it took me a long time to come up with this idea, and I spent 10 years working on it and patenting this idea.
A thought isn't property, and back before there were so many patent laws, you know, there were actually better inventions.
That's a
I
bit.
mean, if you look at it, nobody knows the secret formula to Coca-Cola because they keep it locked down and don't share it. That's how you protect your property. If you put it on the public domain, it becomes public domain.
That's a bit anarchist then, right? Your
Yeah.
perspective on that.
Sure.
Okay.
Which fits in here pretty well.
I'm a writer, so I'm not disagreeing that the government should stay out of it, but I think that there's certainly, without laws, we can certainly protect our own ideas and inventions.
It's got nothing to do with your council race, but I'm wondering just what your thoughts were on watching the video of what was happening in Boston after the bombing.
Yeah.
All the cops coming into people's houses.
Yeah, I think that's...
Imagining judges weren't signing any warrants.
Well, first of all, judges weren't signing any warrants. Second of all, I mean, how would you possibly come up with probable cause for a warrant anyway? And it's a terrible violation of the 4th and 5th Amendment to just allow people in like that and violate your privacy and your right not to disclose what's in your home without being suspected of a crime. I think that's just absolutely abhorrent. That's something that if that were to come up, for example, in my city, this could have to do with city council. Because who knows if this is setting the stage for them to do that all over the country. I think it might be. You know, they use that as precedent. And I'm very disturbed by that.
What do you think people like us that are really involved with pushing liberty as a cornerstone of life can talk, or how can we talk to our friends and family who kind of just shook us off as being crazy? The argument on their side is always, well, what do you allow them to do? You allow them to run rampant? I'm wondering. If
Yeah, actually, where I live, people are a little more libertarian-minded, I guess, and we might live around a lot of statists because people that I live around looked at that as a very terrible violation of privacy, and it's not something that I would stand for. You know, I speak out against it as much as I can, but how much can we as individuals do unless, you know, we all do it together, so.
We're probably on the list.
What you had there was a technique that was designed for Iraq. Cardin and kick. Cardin off an area, kick down every door, looking for somebody. You got guys that are coming back in that training and applying it to the streets here.
It's state violence. I mean, it's just state violence, it's completely illegal state violence, but they do what they want.
They throw money down.
Okay, I have a question about preemptive restraining orders. They're proposing that well, actually I think the law today is a restraining order will take all your guns that you may have legally in your possession. And they are currently in the process of making a restraining order require whoever is the target of that restraining order have an ankle bracelet that tells the authorities wherever they are at that particular time. Based on a simple accusation without any further proof, do you believe, or what's your opinion on them taking your guns and forcing you to have an ankle bracelet?
I mean, we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Well, why should you forfeit your rights without proof?
Well, that's a question.
No, I think
What's your opinion on that?
I don't think that they should do that.
Okay.
We should probably put RFID chips into their brains.
Let's do that.
Yeah, why, how come we can't do that yet?
Given the fact that 82% of all people on the federal level, not states, that are prohibited, not for a year or two, but for the rest of their life from having access to guns, have been convicted under the tax code. Let's not kid ourselves, 82%. And I learned that from a friend of mine. And the thing is, isn't there going to be a little bit of nullification to say, no, we're not going to allow people to be put into categories for permanent loss of rights? What do you feel about rights recovery over time?
Yeah, one of the problems that I see, for example, in our prison system is the way it's so geared toward punishment and not toward rehabilitation. And, you know, and then we look at that, you know, these people come out and we still look at them as that person's a violent criminal for
Not only that, but
you know,
people
but this is for people who aren't even convicted of violent crime. I don't think that anybody who's been convicted of a non-violent crime, I don't personally believe that there is such a thing as a non-violent crime, but anybody who's, you know, been convicted of a non-violent crime, and these people that spend their life, they can't recover their lives. I think that's wrong.
We're talking about, yeah, but what I'm talking about is specifically gun rights recovery. Mm-hmm. Okay. And
I understand what you're saying. People who are convicted of voting rights recovery, gun rights recovery, the full Bill of Rights. Why should you lose your rights? You know, you're convicted of some junk law that had nothing to do with guns.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah. Excuse me. I was stopped. I was stopped by the police for a DWI. I was thrown out, but they still came and got me. I had to turn my. I had to go to court again.
Did you ever get it back?
Yeah, but I had to go to another court.
And if you get felony
And they
convicted of
pay
DWI,
you for your time and your...
No,
of course not.
No, it's terrible. Yeah. I mean, this is just examples of the overreach of the violence of the state.
Yeah.
On the SAFE Act, since you're a commentator on the SAFE Act, how are the politicians now responding to the free market solution with 40-some gun manufacturers saying they will only sell guns to law enforcement in New York that they can sell to civilians?
I don't know that the politicians care. I mean, you look at a video, somebody who maybe we don't all get along with in this room, Russ Thompson out in Buffalo, was getting in an argument with a Republican senator in Buffalo who's still in favor of the SAFE Act, who says there's no chance of repeal and I won't even introduce the idea that we should repeal this. And they're not really responding.
Well, if you look at the Heller decision, well, not Heller, but McDonald, which incorporated the Second Amendment into all 50 states through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, brings equal protection in. So this state right now, New York City, deals with handguns different than the rest of the state, which is a violation of equal protection.
I agree.
But if you look at it at the base of it, nowhere can I find in the state or federal constitution, if you wear a costume and badge to work, you get extra rights.
No. And then what's funny about that is the police actually didn't get an exception or an exemption in that law to these new laws, and they're walking around with illegal guns right now, illegal according to that law. And I was telling people.
See something, say something.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I was telling people at a lot of these rallies in Albany and out my way, I was telling people, we've got the police on our side for now, but what happens when they get this exemption? Are they going to just abandon us? And
Yes, they will.
And that's why the Oath Keepers, I don't know where they were in Boston. So we really have to continue to advocate to our community as vociferously as we possibly can. All the liberty ideas. So
That's a great point about the Oath Keepers' absence in Boston.
I was kind of worried about where they were in Boston. I had some friends on Oath Keepers. They told me. They said, well, if you tell them you're an Oath Keeper, you get a desk job. I don't know. What I was really concerned with was maybe some of these police, they weren't local, like what they did in Pittsburgh at the G20 summit, where they just brought people in from around the country. They no problem kicking in people's doors. They're not their neighbors.
Yeah, but did you see the way the Secret Service reacted to the open carry rally in the park?
I didn't see
We
that.
organized an open carry rally in a park in Pittsburgh, because open carry is legal in Pennsylvania, except in the city of Philadelphia.
How'd that go?
The state police and everybody told the Secret Service to leave them alone. Otherwise, it would have been a civil rights violation.
That was local police. They have, a lot of times the local police, they do have an interest in making sure they have some sort of rapport with their neighborhood. If you bring them in from out of town like they did at the G20 summit, they don't care. They'll pepper spray babies.
It was there was a case where the Pittsburgh Sports Exhibition Authority is trying to keep guns out of the convention center, and public buildings in Pennsylvania are open to carry. There was a state wildlife conservation officer that tipped off the gun rights groups because they turned him away, even though he was off duty with a badge.
Yeah, sometimes we get a good one. So
Let's get one more questions. Anybody on this side? Just to spread it around. Anybody from New York? Just to spread it around. Teasing.
I wonder what your estimate is of the fraction of the people here who would have agreed with the fully informed jury suppositions even before you spoke. Just a hand, just guess and then let's have a hand vote.
I would have said 95%. I would have said 95%, excluding the wait staff that probably wasn't listening.
Well, freedom of information, right?
So if you don't turn in your guns or register them with our governor, New York City governor, they're going to come to your home or look for you and arrest you or what? You just take your guns?
That's unfortunate. They might start doing that, but what I've been trying to work on, as an advocate for nullification, is to really get out there and tell people that if you're on a jury to say not guilty, and before we even get to that, get the counties to try to get some of the district attorneys to say we want to enforce this law, it's junk, and we'll tell the police not to arrest anybody.
County is one of those
We're working on it. There's really no guarantee that any of that's going to work, but we have a liberty message that's tried and true. It's what built this country, so we have to keep trying.
John.
I just want to tell a quick grand jury story. I started on Friday on an Albany County grand jury. But on the first day, they show you a short film New York State made, professionally done with some big stars you'd recognize, like from Law and Order. And one of the cases they reference in the film about the importance of the courts and the jury system is the Zenger case, which was a jury nullification case back in colonial America. But also right after that, one of the instructions they give you is that you must decide the case on the law and the facts, only the law and the facts. So they don't know their own history, but I'm just telling you.
The law is explained to you by the judge.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Kevin.
Yeah, David, I just want to ask you specifically about your campaign, since it's a contested campaign here for the Republican nomination. How are things going with that?
Yeah, right now we're way out ahead of the other candidate in fundraising. For example, already raised $7,000, which campaign for city council where I live, usually 7 to 10 is what they raise in the whole year. So I'm at a record-breaking pace for fundraising, and hopefully that'll get them to reconsider presenting a primary. That would be pretty good. It also looks like I'm probably going to get the conservative nod. So if that comes before the Republican convention, that could also be an extra push that would send them my way. We'll see.
If you get the conservative nod, what is your position on marriage equality going to be? Because they have a litmus test for...
I've already talked to them about this. They haven't really made it in my county a litmus test. I've talked about this. I have a constitutional position on it. I don't believe that marriage is the business of the state.
Absolutely.
so much. Dave McCann. All right. Mark Legowski was kind enough to hand out copies of his book.